Give me just one moment. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live-streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should remute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. A 30-second warning will be provided. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the COVID-19 Special Notice for Public Comment Guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
We
Peter.
can hear you now,
Yeah.
Peter.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm on my phone. My power went out like at 2 o'clock. And it seems to have affected the cell coverage too, because I'm not getting a very good signal. So hopefully this will work. I cannot see anybody. So we just did
We just convened the
convene the
meeting and
meeting
played the
and
COVID
we
video.
did the. Okay.
So we're on to introductions. I will be calling roll call alphabetically by last name. I'm going to go through 3 different categories.
So
One is going to
you want
be
to call the
actual-
roll, Fifi? Do that. Call the roll for the PAC.
one is going to be the actual PAC itself. Next, I'm going to call for all of our TAC attendees, and then I'll be calling for just staff on the plan. So Debbie Allen.
Here. I'm here. It's Deborah Allen.
Okay, thank you. Deborah Allen. Candace Anderson.
She's absent today. I'm here listening in. I'm not a voting proxy for her, but sorry that she's missing today's meeting.
No worries. I was wondering if she was going to send some. Okay, Charlie Anderson.
Here.
Ian Bremer. Ian Bremner.
He's here, but he's muted. You're muted, Ian.
Teresa Geringer.
I didn't unmute. Ian Bremner's here. Yep.
Here. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Ian. Teresa Geringer.
Here.
Nicole Howard. I'm sorry, Nicole Howell.
Hello, I'm here.
Thank you. David Hudson.
Here.
Thank you. Mike Hirsch.
Here.
Jeannie Krieg.
I am here.
Rick Ramassier.
Here.
Josh Sullivan. Josh Sullivan. Debbie Toth.
I'm here.
Thank you. Is there anyone who is on the PAC whose name I did not call? Okay, we're going to move on to the TAC. Roger Acuna. Becky Adams.
I'm here.
Thank you. Trish Burney.
I'm here.
Thank you. Julie Berry. Mary Bruns.
Here.
Lisa Hammond. Lisa Hammond. Marcel Indelicato.
Present, thank you.
Marjorie McWee. Genevieve
Sorry,
Pastor Cohen.
Reported she could not.
Deanna Perry.
Here.
Nat Fan. Joanna Pollock.
Here.
Catherine Riesinger. Kim Ridgway. Susan Roche. Derek Shelton. Drennan Shelton. Rob Thompson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Suzanne Sang. Elaine Welsh.
Here.
Matthew White. And from Nelson Nygaard staff, do we have Naomi Armenta?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Marvin Randleson?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you. Richard Weiner, are you there?
Yeah, Richard Weiner.
Sorry,
Present.
Weiner. And from AMG, do we have Corinne Dutra Roberts?
I'm here.
Thank you. Lori Talbert from AMG, are you here?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. And John Cunningham, I see you there. Jacob Buffinger from Caltrans, are you in attendance? Okay, it looks like we can move on to public comment.
I think that Josh Sullivan arrived.
Okay. If I did not call your name, could you please announce your presence now?
This is Rashida.
Fifi
Kamara with
Josh.
TAC.
I'm sorry.
Rashida Kamara with the TAC.
Rashida. Thank you.
Tanya Shah with Nelson Nygaard.
I'm sorry, Tanya, what was your last name?
Shah, S-H-A-H.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Josh Sullivan. And Fifi, the link that was sent for this meeting, it actually goes, when you click on it, it says meeting already or another meeting is in process by the host. So I had to have Debbie and another provider send me the active link. Just FYI, if there aren't as many people as we expect.
Thank you for letting me know. I'll look into that.
Yeah, that was the prior meeting link. It was sent out by one of the members. So sorry about that. Apologies.
Peter, you want to move on to public comment?
Yeah, and honestly, Fifi, I lost my feed to the agenda too. So we're moving into public comment now. I think there's lots of people potentially on the line that want to make public comments. So we're going to want to keep those, within 2 minutes if we can. If somebody has already said something that you were going to say, just acknowledge that it's been said by the other person and you agree with that. And we'll try and move through this and get into the meat of the agenda. I think if your comment has something is related to one of the agenda items, if you can wait until that item, we'll also open it up for public comment during the agenda items. So is there anybody wishing to make a public comment? And Fifi, I can't see anybody, so I'm going to have to count on you to see people raising their hand.
Okay. I see, let's see, Francis Smith. Please unmute yourself, Ms. Smith.
Thank you. This is my first time being involved in one of these meetings. I
Welcome.
raised 2 children with physical disabilities and worked all my life in the disability world. I'm wondering, I heard Roger Acuna's name called, but I'm wondering how many people with physical disabilities are part of this group.
Naomi?
I don't know that we want to put anybody in position if they're uncomfortable saying that.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't by the button, but I should have been. We don't normally answer public comment, but that's a really good question. So just to let you know, we do have other people with disabilities on the TAC, and I'm actually the project manager from the consultant side, and I also have a disability. I use a wheelchair myself. So thank you.
Let's see, Zina Hassan. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. My name is Zinat Hassan, and I'm a staff attorney at Disability Rights California. We're a nonprofit organization that advocates for the rights of people with disabilities. We are California's designated protection and advocacy agency, and we are the largest disability rights organization in the country. I'm here today to urge that you take decisive, meaningful steps towards the development of a public transportation system that meets the goals of the Americans with Disabilities Act. When the ADA was passed in 1990, it explicitly identified public transportation as a site of pervasive inequality. The ADA divides transportation systems into 2 types, fixed route and demand response. Demand responsive systems like paratransit are dispatched in response to a rider's specific request. And the ADA requires that those systems, when viewed in their entirety, provide a level of service to people with disabilities that is equivalent to the level of service they provide to the general public. To determine whether that standard is met, we look at a variety of factors, including response times, service area, and hours of operation. When we look at these factors and the county's public transportation system as a whole, it becomes clear that people with disabilities continue to face significant barriers to equal access. DRC is commenting at today's hearing because we are alarmed at the widespread issues in the county's paratransit system. These issues include excessive travel times, slow response times, and limited service availability. We are concerned that these issues might place Contra Costa out of compliance with the ADA and other laws that require programs and services be accessible to people with disabilities. A perfunctory paratransit system is not enough to meet the requirements of the ADA. People with disabilities are not a homogeneous group, and their needs vary from person to person. To fully meet the requirements of the ADA, planners need to hold accessibility as a central guiding principle rather than an afterthought. Contra Costa has been studying accessibility for decades and has ample data to inform its next set of decisions. We urge the committee to recommend that the CCTA approve the creation of a new nonprofit entity to serve as the Consolidated Transportation Service Agency. A consolidated agency will be better equipped than the current system to assess the county's operations in their entirety and ensure full compliance with the ADA. Thank you again for your time and for your consideration of these comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think I see any other hands. If you would like to speak, go ahead and speak now. Please unmute yourself. Also, if you do not have video feed, please go ahead and unmute yourself since I can't see if you're raising your hand or not physically. Seeing as there's no hands, Peter, let's go ahead and move on to the approval of actions.
All right. I hope everybody got a chance to read the summary of actions from the last meeting and would look for a motion to approve.
You need a motion, Peter? You got a motion. Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
I will second it.
That was Jeannie.
Jeannie?
Hudson move, Creek second.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and call a roll call vote here. Uh, Deborah Allen,
Yes.
Charlie Anderson,
Yes.
Ian Bremner. Ian, are you still with us? Teresa Geringer?
Sorry about that. Ian Bremner, yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you, Ian. Teresa Geringer?
Yes.
Thank you. Nicole Howell?
Here.
How do you vote?
Approve, sorry. Yes.
David Hudson?
Yes.
Mike Hirsch?
Yes.
Jeannie Krieg?
Yes.
Rick Ramasir?
Yes.
Josh Sullivan?
Yes.
Debbie Toth?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously by all members present.
Great, thank you.
Let's go ahead and move
I
on to the telephone town hall.
Let's move on to that. But before we move on and I turn it over to Nelson Nygaard, I just wanted to remind everybody on the call what the role of this committee is. This committee is not a direct advisory committee to the CCTA. This is a committee that is
We lost you, Peter.
on policy issues.
Peter, you need to start over
move
from
on
this
to
committee
the,
is.
first item, which is, hello? Can you hear me? Okay.
Could you start over with this committee?
This committee, can you hear me?
Yes.
This committee is not an advisory committee to the CCTA, but it is advising the study on policy matters that need to be addressed in the study. Yes. So there's a little bit of a difference there.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and move on to the first item, which is a recap of the telephone town hall, and I'll turn it over to Nelson Nygaard.
Well, thank you. And we're actually going to start with Marvin.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. On late last month, on October 27th, we had a telephone town hall. We thought it was an opportunity to try to approach outreach in a slightly different way in our COVID times. We had a couple of major speakers, which were Candace Anderson, and chair of the Board of Supervisors of District 2, and also Teresa Geringer of Lafayette Council member, also CCTA vice chair. In addition to those featured speakers, we had project staff who were on hand to answer questions and update the public on the status of this project, included Peter, Richard, Naomi, and also John. Corinne was leader of event support and was working in the background along with myself. Next slide. So first of all, telephone town hall works a little bit differently than a Zoom call. We feel it's a little bit more accessible to the public than for persons that may not be technically savvy. So first of all, how this works, before the telephone town hall, we sent out email blasts to people on our email list, people that have interacted with us on our website or through the survey. They were able to pre-register for it ahead of time. All participants, how this works, we call out to their homes. So if they registered in advance or were part of our original phone list, we would call them out in advance of the telephone town hall to let them know that it is on. So this isn't, they don't have to dial in, we dial them. Callers who we call do have the option to be connected to the town hall, or they can decide not to participate. And callers were based upon their pre-registration and the phone numbers that we had on hand from our phone number list, and also phone numbers of targeted demographics, which in this case were persons who lived in the county that were over, I believe, age 60. Next. So once we are in our telephone town hall, it works pretty much like a live radio show. We have a MC who basically coordinates the interaction between staff, the public, and members of the committee. Once connected, we gave short presentations from our featured speakers about the project and what the next steps are. To make it interactive, participants were asked to participate in surveys and ask questions of staff and our speakers about the project and other mobility challenges in the county. So finally, the outcome of this was that first, we made the call available in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. We had 225 people who pre-registered for the telephone town hall. Overall, we called 23,000 phone numbers. As I mentioned before, people had the option to participate or not. Of those 23,000 numbers called, we had 1,150 roughly participants accepted the call. And we, as part of the process to make it as interactive as possible, we asked 4 survey questions. These survey questions were based on the survey that we sent out earlier in the year. And 17 questions were answered by the speakers and staff. Some things to consider as we enter phase 2 of public engagement. Do we want to have another telephone town hall? And how do we engage stakeholders and provide an opportunity for input on our structure going forward and strategies that we will be presenting later on this call? Thanks.
Thanks, Marvin.
Are there any questions?
I do, if I can, Marvin. You said you asked 4 or 5 questions, but did you put up what they were, or any idea what maybe one answer was that caught your attention? What questions were asked? Or one question at least?
Oh, like the question, our first question would just say to warm the participants up was, what part of the county do they live in? That was like just a basic question to get them started, so we can also familiarize them with the process of taking a survey. It's pretty simple. If you weren't on the call, it's select 1 if you live in East County, select 2 if you live in West County or Central County, so on and so forth. Other questions we asked were, are there places you would like to go but are unable to get to due to a lack of convenient transportation? That's a simple yes or no answer. What challenges do you face with existing transportation services in Contra Costa County? And the 4th question was, what transportation services do you need that you do not currently receive? So we're really trying to get the participants to engage with what we should be looking towards to help make transportation better for this county.
I think where I was kind of going with it, Marvin, was there any question that specifically asked, like the lady asked it first, did we even ask the simplest question? I don't know how you do it. Are you in a wheelchair? Are you, do you use this, or have you ever used this?
Yeah, do you use the system, Dave?
Yeah, all of those are great questions, and I think the format.
Believe it or not, we were asked that though, Josh. That's I know what you're saying, but go ahead, Marvin.
Yeah, with the format of this the town hall, we can't. It's just difficult because everything's verbal.
Yeah.
We don't want to have a very long paragraph response, which is much more difficult to use than let's say just a yes or no answer, something that's more simple. Okay. We did also refer people to participate on the website and also to add their email to our list so we can reach out to them if they have any.
Okay.
If we have any further questions.
And Marvin, a general idea to answer a question that earlier was asked.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you, Marvin. So the term town hall as a methodology for stakeholder engagement, was this really just an automated survey tool similar to SAND or Ad Hoc or other digital platforms, or was this an actual information was provided and given?
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, it was like a radio show. Everything was live. We had questions from the audience, from the participants directed at us in real time, and we were able to answer those questions in real time. So it's very much kind of old school, but I do think that we had all the we did as much as we could with the platform that we had, but we do feel it was more accessible to persons that may not have access to technology.
If I could add to that, and then maybe I think we need to move into the next section. Fifi, if you could bring up the next slide. So yeah, thanks. Just a response to Josh and Dave, I think, you know, in addition to those very basic questions, which as Marvin said, was really just to get the juices flowing, we did actually engage in a number of questions that were put to us, including by some people who are on the call today. So there was some opportunity for doing that, but of course we were juggling between our primary objective was to reach far more people than we would otherwise be able to reach through other means. And in case there was some confusion over there, we said there were 225 people pre-registered, but over 1,100 people actually participated. Part of the reason for that is there was a much shorter list of a few hundred of people that we've had contact with or who've responded to surveys and said they wanted to be contacted. And that's primarily how we got the pre-registrants. But the way the company works with this telephone town hall is they put word out to 23,000 people in particular demographic. And that's how we had over 1,100 people on the town hall, which we were thrilled with that kind of response, with that turnout. We were trying to figure out creative ways of doing public engagement in the Zoom context. So let's get to the heart of this meeting. There are a couple of more items towards the end of the agenda, but I think most of us are here because we want to talk about the organizational structure and what the study's going to be recommending. Fifi, if you could please go on to the next slide.
Richard, I'm the one who's doing the slides.
Oh, you are? Okay, thanks, Naomi. Great. So we did send a handout ahead of the meeting. Hopefully most of you had a chance to read it, but on the assumption that not everyone did, I'm going to be touching on the primary issues in this 3-page document in this that we sent out. And there are a few TAC members on this call today, so I'm really pleased. In fact, we've got a fantastic turnout for this meeting today. I'm really pleased with that. But I do want to apologize to TAC members who may have been a little confused by the fact that they were invited to a meeting yesterday that we then decided to postpone. And the reason for that is we realized once we got into this that in terms of developing our recommendations, that before talking about specific mobility strategies, what we really needed to do was get input on the overarching organizational structure that would increase the likelihood of implementation. And so that's why we're having today's meeting, and that's what the next 40 minutes, I believe, we've allocated on this agenda will be about. The purpose is for me to give you an overview of what we are recommending and then to solicit input. And when we get to the input, I'll give some guidance so we can make sure that we hear from as many people as possible. So firstly, this is going to be an iterative process. We are coming out of the study, which is due to end at the end of February. We will be recommending steps to set up an accessible transportation, so a strategic plan, right? The ATS is the name of the study, a task force to implement the recommendations of the study. There are various components that will be included in that recommendation. As far as the composition is concerned, we want to make sure that it's representative of the key stakeholders. So that would include, obviously, advocates of people with disabilities and older adults and veterans, but also people from social service agencies, the transit agencies, funding agencies. We were thinking that a possible approach could be a modified version of the Policy Advisory Committee. So that will be refined over the next few weeks, and certainly we want input on all of these from you today. The mission of this organization would be twofold. One would be to establish a designated entity, yet to be named, which would implement county-wide strategies. The further we've gotten into this, we felt it's really important to distinguish between those that have a county-wide reach, and that would require an entity for implementing those. And then there are low-hanging fruit, which should be implemented, shouldn't have to wait until this coordination entity has been established. And those will be identified by the task force as well. So those are the two primary goals of this task force. We're proposing that this task force could report to CCTA, but we're also open to input on that. It seems like the simplest approach. The agency could provide staffing support in order to expedite this process. Our goal of here is to get things moving as quickly as is practical in the short term. Funding needs should be fairly limited for this entity, because essentially what's going to be required is just the staff support. We do think that the political feasibility should be high. It's not going to be a significant change from the status quo, and so we're hopeful that there'll be enough support to move forward with establishing this task force within 3 to 6 months of the study recommendations being approved by the board and by the Board of Supervisors. Next slide, please, Naomi. So the first thing I mentioned was the task force. And as I mentioned, one of the charges would be to establish this dedicated coordinated entity. The task force will decide where that should be housed. It could be a nonprofit agency. It could be a dedicated public agency. It could be a joint powers authority. There are different ways of approaching it. That entity can apply for a CTSA designation. And for those who don't know, we talked about this last time, but the CTSA designation, which one applies for through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, is in response to legislation from, I believe, the 1980s. I don't have that at my fingertips right now, but there are CTSAs in different parts of the state, which are set up to facilitate coordination of transportation services, specifically for the populations that we are addressing in this study. It's not an automatic designation. That's something that needs to be applied for and needs to have the support of the key stakeholders in the county. Some of the potential strategies that this coordination entity could get involved in would be identifying new funding sources. That's certainly going to be critical, whether it's a sales tax that's going to be needed or some other form of funding. Could be countywide eligibility process. Right now it's fragmented with each agency responsible for eligibility, ADA paratransit eligibility, I should say. Could be an expansion of mobility management functions. It could be a joint scheduling software procurement or resources. So one idea that was posited was possibly having an expert that's available to especially the smaller agencies as they go about their procurements. Having a joint procurement may be more challenging because even though 3 of the agencies do use trapeze, they're at different stages in their cycle and using those. But having an expert available to all agencies would be one of the options. And then oversight of one-seat rides. We know that interjurisdictional paratransit trips are a problem. We also know that a pilot just got started in recent weeks, so we'll be looking closely to see how that develops. But that could be something that could be overseen by this coordinated entity. Next slide, please, Naomi. The political feasibility, that's going to be one of the challenges of this. Of course, this is much more ambitious than what a task force would involve. But we already have some elected officials who are involved in the study who we think will champion this. And with the high level of collaboration of people who are involved in this call and those that you represent, that will go a long way to bringing about the feasibility of actually having this implemented. There will be significant or relatively significant overhead costs to set up something like this. When a previous study was done in 2013, they estimated the overhead costs to be over $300,000 a year. And that's not talking about the actual provision of services. That's just the number that we're throwing out. It could be something different. if it was assigned to an existing nonprofit organization, for example, it could be less than that. And overall, we'll need to look at the costs, or the task force would need to look at it in the context of potential cost savings that could result from establishment of this coordinated entity. There's going to be a significant effort required to set this up. There's a reason why some CTSAs have been successful and others have failed. And there's only one CTSA in the 9-county Bay Area region, and that's in Solano County. But there are others like in Los Angeles and North San Diego County, which have been around for a long time and are very effective. They do have the potential, in contrast to a task force, which would be focused on either shorter term or smaller scale strategies. This entity would have the potential for implementing large scale county-wide strategies, and the potential for securing funding. Funding is obviously going to be a key issue over here. Unfortunately, the record of transportation sales tax measures has not been positive recently. Some have suggested that if a nonprofit put forward a sales tax, it may have a better chance. We've not seen a precedent of that happening in a transportation context, but that doesn't rule out that possibility either. So that's a lot of information that I just conveyed to you, and I did it fairly quickly because we do want to make an opportunity for people to provide input. Given that a lot of people have opinions on this, we are going to have to restrict this part of the agenda to 1 minute per person. And Fifi, if you could help me with that process, just letting me know when or letting the speaker know when we're coming up for a minute. They may have an opportunity to speak again later on, but we want to make absolutely sure that before anybody speaks a second time, everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity. So we may have to pause and just see if anybody's still interested. I can see almost everybody on my one screen. Well, I guess I'll just pull up the participants, but if you want to raise your hand with either the emoji or with your hand, I can start calling on you. And again, as Peter mentioned at the beginning, if somebody's made a statement that you agree with, rather than using up time to just restate what they said, just acknowledge that you're agreeing with the previous speaker, and that will be noted. So let's see how this goes. It's 2:45, and we haven't just over half an hour still to take comments, so that should be a time for ample opportunity for us to hear from people. Who'd like to go first?
One hand raised. Ria Tans Kubota. I apologize if I mispronounced it. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Muted. I gave you the hardest name to start with. I've been shocked at how challenging it is to stop driving. I had no idea it would be this isolating, and something that I find really missing is the ability to get to nature. So I'm suffering for that in ways that I didn't understand that I would. And I just wonder if that can be taken into account, since human beings need connection with nature tremendously. And especially, I think perhaps the older we get, the more we need it. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. And I should have mentioned, I'm not going to respond to, we're taking note of all these comments as input. I'll only respond if something requires clarification. Otherwise, we'll just go on to the next comment. I'm seeing Rashida, but maybe Fifi, you can call on people.
Yeah, let's go ahead with Rashida. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Rashida with County Connection. I'm with the TAC. Just clarification on the coordinated entity. Is the proposal that the task force be the coordinated entity, and could the coordinated entity apply for a CTSA designation? Is that what I heard?
So two parts to your question, Rashida. The first part is we're not assuming that the task force would be the coordinated entity. They would be tasked with coming up with who the either the agency or a new entity would be who would take on that role. And the second part, yes, the assumption is that if there is consensus that a CTSA is a direction that we should go, then they could apply to MTC for that designation.
Am I allowed a follow-up question? It was less than a minute.
Yeah, you're still within your minute.
Okay. The question I had was when you talked about low-hanging fruit, the task force. So will the task force, especially since this study is going to be over in February and you'll have deliverables associated with that, would the task force be responsible for taking care of or overseeing low-hanging fruit before the coordinated entity? Because the timeline for a coordinated entity is much longer, and there are certain things that are low-hanging fruit that may not necessarily need a whole year.
Yeah, thanks, Rashida, for that question. Yes, there's the reason why we have this two-tier process is because we don't want to wait for what could be 12 to 36 months is what we're estimating for the establishment of the coordinated entity. There's no reason to wait for that for some things. So, for example, I think Elaine Welsh has spoken about the way to go guide that her agency is responsible for. Expanding the reach of that, for example, is something that should be short term. There could be other programs. We already know that there are services that are provided that if there was additional funding, and that's probably going to be the determinant for many of the low-hanging fruits, if you will, that those would be ready to go. There could be other things that could be expanded. Some of the volunteer driver program, maybe expanding the reach into more into East and West County. Just so happens that I chose two things that Elaine's agency is responsible for, but there are other strategies, and we're going to be generating a whole list of strategies, which if we want to get into those later, depending on time, I can say what they are. So I think we can go into the next question, Fifi.
Richard, I'm seeing a hand from Elaine Welch. Elaine, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. My question is basically who is going to decide who is going to participate on the task force? I think the membership of that is critical to taking this to the next step. And is that going to be recommended by Nelson Nygaard? Is that going to be done locally? How will it be decided who are the participants on that task force that will be making these recommendations?
That's a really good question, Elaine. I'll answer the first part, and I'll either have Peter, John, or Karina answer the second part. We will be recommending not necessarily who the people are, but who the roles are that should be on that committee. As I say, we think in the interest of time, starting off with a modified version of the PAC would be a good place to start. But would anybody from CCTA or John like to respond to who would actually make those decisions?
I'd like to hear from Peter, but as far as from the county's position, CCTA is the lead on this study, and the intent is for sort of the recommendations and input from the state to eventually go to CCTA. And so that body, the Transportation Authority, we believe would be the most appropriate entity. But then it's also it's a bit of a circular argument because we are determining who the responsible agency is as a part of this process. So it sounds like Peter has some input as well.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
By the way, my power's back on. I'm just waiting for everything to reboot so I can log back in. But I didn't hear the entire question. I think what was asked was what would be who would kind of be the oversight of the task force, or how would the task force be under what umbrella would the task force be put together? Was that the question?
No, Peter, it was who would make the decision about who on the composition. We would recommend as part of the study, but who would actually decide who's on that task force?
Well, that's a good question. I think it could be two things. It could be accommodate because the authority is kind of the lead on this study, but ultimately there will be a joint adoption of the study between the Board of Supervisors and CCTA. Of course, there are there are Board of Supervisors that have seats on the authority. So, you know, if we would discuss that with the Board of Supervisors, we would certainly do outreach to the agencies. We would look for a similar makeup. I think you had mentioned this, Richard, of the existing PAC and the agencies that are represented on the PAC. So social service agencies that provide transportation services, social services that maybe don't provide transportation services, but certainly have a clientele that heavily uses the accessible transportation, as well as the transit authorities, because of the role that they play, obviously providing accessible transportation through the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we could potentially look for a joint decision on who appoints those seats, but there will definitely be stakeholder involvement, like there has been during the study process.
Thanks, Peter. Fifi?
Debbie Toth, go ahead and unmute yourself.
So I first want to ask a question, a point of clarification. So you're telling us we have 1 minute to make a comment or ask a question and we're not going to discuss this? Or is this just for public comment right now? I'm trying to get clarification before I say what I say.
Yeah, we're just getting input now from people who are on this call. If there's time for discussion later, we will, we can open things up, but we want to make sure that everybody who wants to talk has a chance to. So if you can, keep, and of course there's opportunity afterwards if you want to submit comments, but for now, to make sure everyone has a chance, please limit it to 1 minute.
Okay, I read the report that came out on Monday and have concerns that there's 2 recommendations: to develop a task force, which, by the way, to develop the TAC and the PAC took over a year just for this process. And I'm concerned about that. When we talk about low-hanging fruit, all of us providers have had to figure out how to provide services to our people, because they need service above and beyond what's being offered. So we haven't been waiting around for anything to happen. We've been doing it all along. And I don't think that setting up a document that sends out to everybody saying the goal is to maintain the status quo after we've had 30 years of under utilization and under accessible services is a goal that we should get behind. I think we need to have a conversation about this, and 1 minute is not enough time to address that, or the fact that the idea of coordination happens around one topic rather than just building a separate entity. CCTA, the county have had 30 years, nothing's happened. Let's do something transformational and let's talk about it. That's my comment.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of your first comment, Debbie, we're not talking about maintaining the status quo, just the opposite. Of course, we are fully aware that the programs that are being provided and have been provided for the last 30 years, and as part of our stakeholder interviews, we're very conscious of many of the things that are being provided that exceed the ADA minimums. The point of the task force would be to identify, in addition to the service, either expanding those services or adding new services that can be done in the short term. So there's no assumption that that's not already happening. Of course, we know that that's happening. As far as the second part of could you just repeat the second part about coordination? What your point was there, Debbie?
So the way that it's structured, and the report does say maintain the status quo. It's in there twice actually, but the second point was the way that second goal, because you have it listed as 2 recommendations, the second recommendation, and when you went over it verbally just now, you said or this or that, as if these are options for coordination. We would just focus on a single seat trip, or we would just focus on one eligibility tool, or we would just, so, the coordination has to happen across everything.
Okay, it may have been poorly written. Now I understand your point. As far as the first point, status quo was not referring to status quo in terms of the services provided. The point that was made over there was to go from a policy advisory committee composition to the task force composition is not going to be a huge leap. The actual establishment of that status quo, we're referring to this body, for example, it shouldn't take a long time. The point was being made that it should not take a long time to go from the current body to actually establishing the task force. It was not in any way intended to refer to the types of services that would be provided, which would be an expansion of existing services in addition to new services. So status quo, again, maybe we shouldn't have used that, but that was not intended to refer to the services themselves. As far as the coordinated entity, there's no debate over here. We're absolutely on the same page. Choosing a structure, yes, we're talking about. It could be an agency, it could be a nonprofit organization, it could be designating one of the transit agencies to serve in that role for a centralizing role. It could be a variety, but one model needs to be selected. But of course, that entity will be responsible for coordinating a range of strategies. There's no intent. If that's how it's written, then we absolutely need to change the way it's written. There's no intent that they're going to be responsible for one strategy at all. So I'm sorry if that's the impression you were left with. Hopefully that clarifies it. Good. Thanks. Next, Fifi.
I'm not seeing any more electronic hands, physical hands. Okay. Ian, go ahead.
Hi, I work with adults with developmental disabilities that are behaviorally challenged, and we seem to come up at the end of most of these conversations. But how do we safely transport with this new mandate that is going to be client-centered planning? Has the task force taken into consideration what the regional center is mandating for adults with developmental disabilities? Is that part of this?
This study certainly looks at people with all disabilities, and there's certainly no intention at all to have people with developmental disabilities left to the bottom of the list. The role of the regional centers is going to be really important because right now that is an issue throughout the Bay Area in terms of how those clients are being served. Should the regional center be providing more of those services rather than the paratransit programs? Should there be cost sharing, for example? Those are going to be the issues that they would need to take on. Thanks.
We're having to buy more and more vehicles as providers, which was not something that was the original intention. It was to teach transportation.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. I think Fifi, was Charlie the next person?
Charlie, please.
Okay, thank you. So there's, I hear a big appetite for transformational change always. And at the bottom of all of this and our inability to meet needs in this county is that this county has been under-resourced for paratransit for decades and for sales tax measure after sales tax measure. So I think that, this is a helpful step to actually, again, define the problem, define what we can do, put out expectations about what can realistically be delivered under the current circumstances. And I think that, leaping to the organizational issues is leaving out a key step. So I think that, a task force ought to be convened to get a list of issues that need to be addressed in this county. And then there are a variety of different types of needs in the county that can't be addressed by rushing to a new institutional arrangement. So I think that there's discussion. There is not a list coming out of this study necessarily that says, here are the key top priority issues for this county right now. And I think that needs to happen before a lot of time is invested in what does the structure look like. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. I will just say that while it may not be framed as a list of the key issues, we have certainly spent a lot of time identifying what the gaps are that we've heard through, this massive public engagement that we've had. So I'm hoping that the task force is obviously not going to be starting from scratch, right? They're going to have a lot of information. What it may involve is looking at the gaps that have been identified in the study and prioritizing those, or formulating it as a list of key issues as you describe it. But I just want to make sure that, there's an understanding that there will be a lot of information for them to go with. And yes, I agree with you, sifting through those and not spending too much time on that, but really just getting clarity on what the key issues are is going to help move the agenda forward in terms of making the distinction between which things can be done in the short term and which things will require, longer term coordinated entity to implement them. Thanks for the comment.
Before
yeah.
leaving, if I could just make a request that,
yeah,
there have been presentations and a lot of materials discussed here, but I think having a library of resources or distribution of information that has been collected and, kind of analyzed would be really useful to this group or the succeeding groups.
Great, thanks for the suggestion. That's a good one. Fifi?
Any other physical hands? No. And no electronic hands. Sorry, Nicole Howell, go ahead. And then Peter, when she's done.
Hello. I just wanted to provide some feedback as I'm hearing about this sort of like radio style town hall. And what I'm hearing is that I think we need more information about the people and making sure they're actually using the service. And with respect, what kind of there's more information there. And while I do believe the older adult population and the disability community have a lot of overlap, there are some separate and distinct needs that I think we did not quite get our handle around, and that format may not be great for them to facilitate their provided feedback. I also just want to say, I feel like there's a language issue when we're talking about sort of the need for change, and the document that was provided to us is that I hear you writing in bureaucracy style, which tends not to work real well with community nonprofits, that we operate at different speeds. And I think we just need to clarify some language about what our expectations are of. We have been delivering these services for many years and see the gaps, and we see the gaps as what are killing people. We see the gaps as the real problems of equity. And that is why we're really saying, hey, we think we're not quite there yet, and we think we need transformational change.
I would appreciate, we absolutely don't want this to come across as too bureaucratic. Obviously, that would be counterproductive. So any input you can give us in terms of the language we'd welcome. As far as your first point, we're very cognizant, especially when we do demographic analyses and that sort of thing. It's a lot easier to get information on older adults because it's easy to just give age cohorts than it is for people with disabilities. But over the years and with the American Community Survey, we've been able to do that with the accumulation of enough information on the disability community. For the purpose of the telephone town hall, we did actually debate internally whether we should ask people whether they have a disability, and it was decided that that would be considered to be too intrusive to ask that question. So, they did not have the ability, the company doesn't have the ability to put out calls to people who have disabilities. So seniors are usually used as a proxy for that, knowing full well that all of us involved on this team have been working on accessible transportation for people with disabilities for decades, probably 60, 80 years between us. So we understand there's a difference between the needs, even though there's a lot of overlap. But please do give us your suggestions in terms of the language. Back to you, Fifi.
Peter?
Well, I think Josh had a question. Go ahead and let him go first. Oh, okay. I wanted to say back on kind of the process thing with two of my board members on the call here, Mr. Hudson and Mrs. Geringer, that traditionally CCTA has not been an operating entity and done operations of this type of things. So it would be a policy change for us that our board would have to obviously consider in going through this. Now, as most of you probably know, our executive director is retiring next month, and we'll be having new leadership from an executive perspective, and we'll have some new board members on the board. So I'm sure they're willing and anxious. I'll let them speak for themselves to, take up a discussion on the best way to move this forward and put some priorities from the authority's perspective behind this. But I just wanted to, point out with them on the call here that this discussion hasn't, it's just being proposed as part of this study. It hasn't been, discussed yet with the authority board.
Actually, 3, Peter, when you consider the ex officio.
Oh, that's right. There is 3. Sorry about that. And then I just also wanted to, I didn't want to give the the idea that the telephone town hall was the only outreach that was done. There was a significant amount of outreach prior to that was more focused on, a survey and better communication. It was done in multiple languages, as well as focus groups that were done in multiple languages with specific groups, both seniors and different groups of people with different disabilities. So,
thanks, Peter.
And all of this during COVID has been challenging, but it's we feel like we've gotten a lot of good feedback.
Rick has his hand up.
Rick.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you. I'm just going to hop on something Peter said real quickly, and I think others have touched on this, Richard. And it's not my contract, and I don't know what you're responsible for producing, but I think, you alluded to in the first paragraph of the write-up that we all got, that a bunch of work has been done. And what I think you're hearing generally from folks is, where is the work and can we see it? It would be very helpful to see the results, the detail of the town halls. Nothing like that's been done in this county, to my knowledge, in many years. I'd like to see it. It would be very useful, I think, for the transit operators to see that information. We are now in our industry having a lot of heart-to-heart talks with folks about how to better get into the community and understand the needs that the typical bureaucratic data collection process misses. We know that a lot of the people that need services don't trust us and won't even talk to us. So that and some of these gaps that you're identifying, I think you need to get that out to us in what would be traditional consultant deliverables, because I think it would be very helpful. So that's my piece.
Great. Thanks, Rick. And maybe my teammates can help me over here, because as far as I'm concerned, I thought we had actually produced documents which have been shared, but Naomi, do you want to jump in on this one? Because we have got a lot to share. So if that hasn't been shared, then we should talk about that. Naomi?
A lot of items have been shared through our meeting processes, and those are actually all on the project website under project documents. So that includes all the slides about all the outreach, the briefing book that this PAC got, all the PowerPoints, all of those things are there. And in terms of the other items, we are furiously working on them behind the scenes. And I know, Tanya's taking a lot of notes. She's been working on the demographics and the outreach chapter, so that we really do want to start sharing that with you as soon as possible. But right now it is really messy. So we are working on that, and we appreciate that feedback, and we're going to start getting that out to you as soon as it is legible. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thanks, Naomi. Yeah, I thought there was documents that we have produced that you can find on the website. So I would encourage you to go there, but absolutely, there's going to be a lot of information shared, presumably in the coming weeks, because we want to make sure that we get this all done, get this out there before the holidays as well. Next.
Richard, it looks like Elaine Walsh has her hand up.
Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken? Because this is my
Yeah, Elaine's spoken, and I know Debbie would want to speak a second time as well. And Josh hasn't spoken yet.
And Deborah Allen.
I thanks, Richard. I just, with our last meeting, I talked with, we raised the question about increased community involvement in the process to get the input, right? Even before we have a product that you're presenting. Hearing the concerns about how to navigate asking people to self-identify as to whether or not they have a disability. We have a very vibrant disability community in our county. And that's kind of, you know, basic stuff for us. So if you involve maybe one or two providers or individuals that really know how to navigate that, I think you could dramatically change the input that you're trying to get for your finished product. Yeah. I just continuously want to lean in on the importance of we have a vibrant community, and I'd love to see them involved at every level.
Josh, let me clarify. My comment was in response to the telephone town hall specifically, and how do you do this when you're going out to the larger public? What you're saying, absolutely, we've been engaged with representatives of the disability community all along. We certainly have information on, we have hundreds of people that we've had contact with, including organizations. We've done focus groups with people with visual impairments. We've done focus groups with students with disabilities. So please understand that that comment was a narrow response to the town hall. As far as the rest of it, we absolutely are committed to identifying the disabilities that are represented in the study. So there's no question, we have no argument with you on that. And yeah, it was just putting it out there in the public to 23,000 people was more of an issue over there. But we have reached quite a diverse range in the community. Deborah Allen, I think, was.
Thank you. Hey, I'm just excited to see the discussion, and I really hope that the discussion becomes a meaningful project and solutions in the end. In my first, I think, 2 years as a BART director, I did some research on what was happening with our paratransit and how the money was flowing, and that was the most interesting part to me, was where the money was flowing and how it flowed. I think we can do so much better than our current situation, and so I just wanted to let you know I'm excited to be a part of whatever develops here, and I'm with you.
Thank you. Has Rashida spoken yet?
Yet.
You can have mine.
Thank you, Dave. I'll take it.
Wasn't Elaine going to go again?
Well, if Rashida's spoken already, there are two other people who have spoken who would like to speak a second time. So we should just make sure there's nobody else who wants to speak. And then
I don't see any other electronic hands. Looking for physical hands.
I would like to speak. This is Joanna Pollock.
Sure.
Hi, Joanna.
And I didn't really think about this because I was literally meditating while you guys were talking. So we already did a study in West County, and I think a lot of the data you collected countywide reflects on that same outcome, that basically we know we don't have enough money to serve the people. There's too many gaps. There's too many fare exchange. There's not enough coordination. I think we kind of got to that same conclusion 2 years ago. I think what we're really, the heavy lift right now is systemic change. I mean, are we going to do something drastically different? Can we do something drastically different? Are we going to take baby steps? Are we going to go big? Are we going to get funding? Is there leadership? That's just, how I'm hearing it. The town hall probably didn't tell you anything different than I heard when I went out and did 5 or 6 public outreaches in West County. So I'm really confident we know the information. I think what I feel the big challenge is exactly what we're talking today: leadership, structure, funding, all those things. So I'm not saying it's easy. I think we are, up against a huge challenge, on top of the fact transit agencies are devastated by COVID. I don't know what that's going to do to shape the future either. So I'm just summarizing. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Fifi.
Rashida.
Thank you. There was something that I thought that was missing that I think is mentioned, but hasn't. We haven't. That's the real problem when we think about funding. Charlie mentioned earlier about us being underfunded through all these different measures, but as part of this study, have we taken what it cost for BART to be able to run services? That's the public transportation system. Have we taken the AC transit budget? Have we taken the, county connections budget? Have we taken all of those budgets have we taken what it actually costs to run service the way that it is now, including all of these other small services that we offer? Have we taken choice in aging's budget and kind of put it all together in order for us to say that this is the type of money that's actually flowing through this system, and this is the type of money it's going to take to fill the gaps. This is what we're able to accomplish through all these fragmented systems. But this is what it's actually going to take. If we're missing this, if somebody early on the call said that I can't get to nature. So now we have to identify what types of trips are nature trips. Are we talking about what types of trips are nature trips? And is it a need for somebody? When you think about physical therapy or occupational therapy, it's probably a need for somebody to be able to either go out to the zoo or go out to the park, whether it's for therapy or just, I woke up today and it's Saturday and I want to take my kids to the park. So have we taken that type of funding systems and applied it to, this is potentially what's missing, this fundamental funding gap is missing in order for us to be able to put these pieces together?
Hi, Rashida. Yeah, firstly, I just want to acknowledge that funding is the critical issue. So I'm pleased you're raising that. And it's going to be critical for the task force to identify the funding and the funding gaps and the funding sources. And then obviously for the coordinated entity, that is going to be critical. That was not part of this study. Given the situation in which we're in right now, where things are in such incredible flux, it would be impossible to actually give a number to what the gap is going to be. Just looking at the ridership trends, looking at the configuration of, that is not a number that could realistically be put forward. However, as part of their mission, the task force would certainly need to, and we have what we have done in the studies documented to the extent possible that all the services that are being provided. So that's the first step in that direction. But to actually add all of that together when sales tax revenues are fluctuating, I don't think would be a meaningful exercise at this point. But we know that funding is going to be critical, and that's going to be one of the most important things for the task force to identify. So we are actually beyond the time that we said we were going to be, and I want to make sure that Naomi has time to talk about the specific strategies. Peter, do you want to say anything about how, because I know there are a few people who have wanted to add, to this discussion, what forum would be the best way for us to get their input? Both Elaine and Debbie and others have said they would like to speak. So short of sending us emails with information, we are going to, well, Naomi will be talking about next steps, but is there anything else you want to add before Naomi goes into hers? Peter's
great speech, Peter.
Okay, why don't we, Naomi, why don't you take over the next slides? And because I know you're going to be talking about next steps, maybe by then, if Peter or John or Corinne want to add. Naomi, next slide, please.
Okay.
It looks like Peter is trying to say something before we move on.
I couldn't unmute myself, but that was resolved. So, well, I mean, if you want, if people are willing to stay on a little longer, we can go through a few more issues right now. I don't know how much, discussion we have time for. We are scheduling another PAC meeting in December, but we're getting late in the process here. We need to start moving. People are asking for your recommendations and what strategies you're bringing forward, and we were going to do that this month and put that off till December. So I think we certainly need to provide an opportunity for people to still provide you comments on this paper. I think it might be worth, prior to doing that if there's some misleading information in the paper, and it sounds like maybe there was, we need to read through it again and correct some of that language if there is things that talk about status quo and those weren't meant, and clarify those. So I guess I would encourage people to send in that information. I think if I mean, I would like to say if Debbie and I can't remember who else had a comment, Elaine, maybe we could take a few
Nicole,
minutes
I think. Yeah.
and just hear from them and make sure that they get their comments heard. We want to make sure we get people heard on this. So
I'm happy to stay on the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, last show of hands, and we'll just kind of go through in the order that I call them. So we'll have Debbie, and then anyone else?
Elaine had asked.
Elaine's been waiting.
Okay, so we'll have Elaine Welsh followed by Debbie Toth.
Now? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I guess I'm making a general comment and I want to combine it into two in a few seconds. And that is each of us who are running our agencies right now and trying to meet all the COVID needs and all the craziness in the world right now and unpredictability are budgeting right now for next year. Okay. And even after that. And it's kind of difficult to know if we are going to be here at Mobility Matters expecting to continue providing what we're providing. And we're creating even a bigger program that now has something to do with bands, et cetera. I don't know how much to just keep acting like a CEO that's moving forward with a strategic plan versus holding back, waiting to see what's going to happen. And that is a major problem for me and my board of directors. What I'm really looking for and what my board asked me for out of this meeting and this whole process is what is new. What is different about this study? And I don't mean this as a criticism, Richard and Naomi. What didn't we know that we know now that will get us into an action plan? I guess that's it. I'm waiting for this light to come on and say, aha, this is why we have to move right now, because I've sat through 4 of these studies and participated in some vigorously, and I'm still waiting for the big aha moment. Why do we know this is the time right now, particularly when we do not have measure of funds behind us to go ahead and move forward? So it's really asking in 2 parts. Are we to just proceed as I would normally proceed in our role and grow and do? Or is there some desire to have us hold back and wait? I don't know how to manage like that and not knowing what's new and what's coming.
Okay, I can take a first stab at responding to that, and then if anybody else wants to jump in. As far as proceeding, I would say, yeah, absolutely, you should proceed because, you know, if it's not going to be before February, before the study's approved, and then it could take 3 to 6 months. So if you're looking a year out, I'm assuming you should just proceed. If funding does come through, it's going to take a while before that happens. So you should assume that, you know, there won't be specific new funding sources that are going to in some way influence the way your board would make decisions about how to move forward. So I can't think of a reason why you would not want to proceed. As far as what's new, you know, we didn't want to take on knowing the history. We were not interested in taking on another study which was going to sit on a shelf. I mean, we don't like to do that generally, but there's been quite a history over here, and I think, you know, without getting into the specifics of what happened the last time around, you know, what we think is different is that, you know, going for something bold and ambitious and stuff, while everybody thinks that that's really critical and, you know, having something transformative is really important, that was proposed last time around. And we think that there's a need for an interim step, setting up this task force, which will create a much better opportunity for actually accomplishing that and not waiting in the meantime for that to be accomplished, because there'll be other things that need to be done. But setting up a CTSA, for example, takes significant political will, and it requires cooperation from all the entities involved. And that's not going to happen in the short term. So while it's, you know, aspirational, we understand that. We didn't want to go for that as the primary recommendation of the study and have this sit on the shelf again for another 7 years. So we think it's really critical that both parts be in place. One, an interim measure with this task force that is focused on moving shorter term projects forward, and at the same time taking the steps that are needed to have a centralized entity. What we heard in our stakeholder interviews is that there is an appetite for having an entity to administer a variety of things, that some things lend themselves to a coordinated entity. So at least that much there is a consensus on. What exactly that entity is going to be coordinating is a step that would need to be decided later on. So we think the difference is that there is an effective short-term measure that can be implemented and should be implemented in the next 3 to 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
It's an effective short-term measure, but it also has a mission for more longer-term presence. And
that's right. Debbie?
So I was going to talk finance, but Richard, you just said something that really ties it all together, which is political will. And if in a time of COVID, when people who are 85 years old and older are dying at 630 times the rate of people aged 19 or 18 to 29, if it does not make imperative why we shouldn't have people in institutions, and that's how they end up there, they lose the ability to go where they need to go, then I don't know when we have a political will for that. Who has Fran has 2 children with disabilities, and who tells that parent that there's no political will to make sure that her children can get to school? Like, this is the time, folks. Like, there is no other time. If we don't have the political will for this, and if our elected officials are not standing up and saying we need to do better, then we've got some serious problems in our community. Yes, the finances are an issue. But could you imagine if 30 years ago we did study after study for commuters and said, we need to do HOV lanes, we need to do a 4th bore for the Caldecott Tunnel, we need to add bike paths, and we never did anything for 30 years, what it would be like? We have CCTA, we have bold leadership. They're doing transformational work when it comes to autonomous vehicles. Why are we not doing transformational work and making the commitment to people with disabilities and frail elders? I don't think we should be level setting around what finances are. I think we should be creating what finances are, just as we do for every other population, except elders and except people with disabilities.
I'm with you, Debbie. I heard what you said. And the impression I'm getting from people who have a history over here is that there is more collaboration this time around and that there is political will. So I'm hoping that that is the case. And that may be the response to Elaine's earlier question. What is different this time is my understanding is that there's a lot more collaboration and that there's a lot more there are people who are willing, there are elected officials who are willing to champion this and take it to the next step. Peter, did you want to add anything?
No, well said from both of you.
Thanks.
Don't see any other hands. Final call.
So Richard, what's your time?
We have a hand.
Let me just say I think we want to give an opportunity for at least a few days to get people that if they have written comments on the paper, and we'll take into account those kind of issues. Richard will go back and look at those regarding, some of the wording and wordsmithing on that and make it appropriate. But what do you think, Richard? 3 or 4 days, or how much time?
I mean, the changes that Debbie suggested could be done in 10 minutes. That's a very quick thing, just really clarifying what was intended. I think it was Nicole, I'm not seeing on my screen, who spoke about the language sounding too bureaucratic. So if you'd like to make suggestions for improving that, as soon as you send it to us, I don't think that will take us long at all. So it really depends on you getting to us or anybody else who wants to. So sometime early next week should be fine.
And given the holiday, we can give them until after the holiday, right?
Well, I think if all we're talking about is just cleaning up the language over here, that should just take a very short amount of time. Unless, Peter, you're asking about something more substantial here.
Well, I mean, if there's people that haven't spoken up that have some serious reservations about moving this recommendation or how this recommendation might move forward, then I think they need to provide that comment.
Then we should wait till after the holidays, as Naomi's suggesting. Yeah.
Mary?
I would just like to add something. I think one of the main things that's on the table that has been articulated, but maybe needs emphasis, is people are concerned about how much will be accomplished from having had this study Will it be transformational change, or will it be small incremental change to kind of make ourselves feel good about what's been accomplished? And to me, as I listen to what Debbie has said and what others have said, what I get is our world is dealing with things like Black Lives Matter, women's lives matter, abuse has to stop, neglect has to stop, equity has to happen. And we're not just talking about the people here on this call, we're talking about the consciousness in all people. And you know, there was a lady that recently went to the hospital for COVID and was just shocked that she had COVID, shocked that masks matter, because she hadn't believed the science. So to me, this is the huge issue of how you get your regular person to get on board that all people have needs, and that one need is as important as another need. So, I mean, what this group is tackling is actually enormous in nature. It's very important, but I think we should keep in mind that this is a big hill to climb. And it's really what humanity as a whole is dealing with. Some people are focused on older people, some people are focused on disabilities, some people are focused on women, some people are focused on abuse, some people are focused on Black Lives Matter, or American Indigenous Peoples Lives Matter, or whatever group you happen to belong to. But it seems to me that each one of us is part of a minority, and we need to understand that it takes a long time to get people of different levels of consciousness to get people to agree that all lives matter. So, I mean, this is the challenge that I think we are each articulating in different ways.
Thank you.
Well said.
Should we go on to Naomi's slides? And just to clarify, based on what you were saying, Peter, that we should give people opportunity to comment on more than just the language. If we'll need to do this and wait until after Thanksgiving to get back to you with the refined document.
Okay.
Oh, shoot, I was already on the slide and it took me back all the way at the beginning. This is going to be fast, I promise. We're really just talking about our process going forward, because as we mentioned, we decided we needed to push back an evaluation on specific strategies a little bit to work on these very important issues first. So as was mentioned in the email that you got, we've decided we need a December PAC meeting to address the strategies and hopefully some other materials we can share with you. And so that poll was included in the email that was sent to you. So we ask you to please go ahead and complete that so we can get that meeting scheduled. I've listed the evaluation criteria that we shared with you last month. This is just an overview. Our plan is, as we mentioned we would last month, to still send you homework. We will send you criteria worksheets and list of strategies so that we can learn your priorities. And then I'm going to ask you to think about, and you can share with us via email or however you like, the question of, do we do another telephone town hall? It's part of our slate of outreach. We've done a lot of different methods of outreach. We had originally thought, hey, if this goes well, we could do another one. And there are some limitations to it. So we would like your input about whether we should make that investment of time and funds, or And also what would be a good way, like what would be good simple poll questions we could ask at that to achieve what we're wanting. And if that's not the answer, how do we engage our stakeholders and writers and provide an opportunity for input on structure and strategies? So please get back to us on your thoughts on those. And that, I think, is actually all I really have. Yeah. And then I'm turning it back over, I think, to Peter just to finish us out on the agenda.
Thanks, Naomi. Let me see if I can. Hey, my system came back here. Yeah, you already went through the meeting in December. So if Fifi, how hard would it be to send that doodle poll out to everybody again, just so it pops up first thing on there? And some of you already filled it out. Just ignore it. But if you haven't, we would like to get that meeting scheduled as soon as possible, so that we can get going on those issues for December. And then we have a final meeting already scheduled, I believe, in January. So that's it. We appreciate you staying with us a little bit longer. Again, get your comments on the document that was sent out to Richard. If some of it is regarding the language, making it less bureaucratic, if you can get that information to him sooner rather than later. And then if there's just concerns with the approach, then we need that information as well, because it'll feed into how the recommendations go forward out of the study.
Peter, since emails haven't come directly from me, do you think we could have them go to you, the comments go to you, and you can just forward them to me?
Yeah, you could just send them to either myself or to Fifi Fedoris, and so use the email that you get when she sends out the doodle poll link again. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Thanks.
All right, you all stay safe. If you feel the need to call up PG&E and tell them how upset you are with them that they took my power out at 2 o'clock, go ahead and do that. But have a safe Thanksgiving and holiday, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.